my pleasure to introduce three girls who made a tremendous impact in America and are beginning to show up in the charts here too. It's welcome to Martha and the Vandellas.
People always reference Motown as being, the pinnacle of achievement.
These young people change music forever.
So I was like, I wonder who these American groups are. I've never heard them, the kind of funny names, the Miracles and Marvelettes.
Dave was fairly well single-handedly responsible for bringing Motown to the British public.
He helped in every way that you can possibly imagine to further our career.
It was bringing heaven to your hometown. It was extraordinary.
And I got on stage, and there was Stevie Wonder waiting.
After show, went backstage and met everybody. What a day.
All this middle bit was totally empty.
Yeah. Well, they called it the Ghost Tour.
Motown was more than just great music. It was a total game changer in terms of the perception of what black people are.
That was the power of Motown. That was the power of the music that was coming from Motown.
So much energy, so much presentation. I mean, we're just going, oh my God, this is the future.
A man called Dave Godin lived at Church Road. Dave was a guy who set a base for soul music in the UK. In the 60s, as I was growing up as a teenager, there wasn't much opportunity to hear rhythm and blues and soul music on the radio, and Bexley Heath was kind of the catalyst, if you like, for actually bringing rhythm and blues to a wider set of ears. When we talk about Motown coming to Britain, who would have imagined that it was in a terraced house in Bexley Heath that the whole thing started?
Dave Godin was a young lad born in Peckham. His dad was a milkman, his mother was a cleaner. When he was 6, he realised he was totally different to everybody else, but he didn't know why. He saw things a different way to other people, and that's how he lived the rest of his life. He was a pacifist, an anarchist, human rights, animal rights, activist. He joined any club he could get his hands on. Dave Godin used to go in the Silver Lounge ice cream parlour in Bexley Heath. Every Friday night for a Knickerbocker Glory. It was like a school treat. He got a brand new jukebox set up in the corner, a spanking brand new, shiny American jukebox, and this great music was belting out of it, and it hit him straight away, and he thought, what's this?
And the chap who put it on, he said, do you like that record? I said, God, it's marvellous. And he said, oh, that's American rhythm and blues. Couldn't believe it. The lyrics, there was a female singing like a woman. He treats your daughter mean, he's the meanest man I've ever seen. It was a road to Damascus moment.
It's about soul, the voice. There's something there that draws you in, that is authentic and real. It's not just a singer singing a song for entertainment's sake. It's something else going on there, and I think that's what attracted Dave, and that music really set him on a path that we know led ultimately to Motown.
To understand what happened with Motown, you kind of have to know a little bit about, how it came about. Barry Gordy, the founder of Motown, was a songwriter. It wasn't a business like the existing record company.
You had this building on West Grand Boulevard, and it was in a racist country. You had a black man start a record company that the motto was not the sound of Black America, it was the sound of young America.
Barry's early work experience was he'd worked on the assembly line in Detroit for Ford. And he'd basically seen the way the cars are put together.
He thought, if I could watch a piece of metal come on one side and go through all these steps and come out a car, why can't I take an artist and mold them into becoming a star?
It was a lot of fun for us because we'd never really been in a recording studio before. So when Motown Hitsfield came about, it was like, whoa, now we've really, really made it here.
You get the writers, then you need the performers, but then you need the producers to kind of polish it, right? And then you need marketing people, and so he did it in a kind of assembly line type way. So that was the creative vision behind Motown.
It's a little house, but everybody came there wanting to do great things. So you can imagine what it was like in there. I mean, when you listen to some of the Motown records, you can literally hear the drum kit moving around. And they left it in. They left all that stuff. But those things is what made it sound so different. It was that rawness.
There was no question what was going to happen. From day one, Barry Gordy was going to conquer the world.
At that point in the 60s, we'd just shaken off the aftermath of the war, and young people actually stopped looking backwards and started looking forwards. But I think most people in Britain really had no idea of what Motown was then.
The number of people who were into early Motown was tiny. It really was like a fairly obscure cult.
There was a magic, there was an intensity. It got its hooks into you. It just really was extraordinary. I mean, it was unlike any other pop music that you would hear on the radio in Britain.
The first time Dave Golding ever heard the Marvelettes' Please Mr. Postman, he went mental. He once played it 10 times non-stop in a row because he liked it that much.
It presses buttons inside your head which you can respond to. You may not be able to put it into words, but you feel it. It communicates in an invisible way, and it doesn't just communicate through the head, it communicates through the guts as well.
Nobody really knew, other than the devotees, the weirdos, the nerds, the ones who needed to know about this music and loved it. People didn't necessarily know what the Motor City of Detroit was.
You felt like you were part of a kind of niche. You had your own music and your own way of doing things.
You lived outside of certainly the big cities. You were unlikely to have come across Motown. If you lived in Liverpool, you probably did because records came in the ports, then you really didn't hear anything except the mainstream pop that was being played on the radio at the time.
You have to put pop music in the early 60s in the context of where and how were people going to hear it. There were limitations. It was difficult, you know. The BBC wasn't the place to hear pop music very much, and what they played tended to be a lot of British music. You know, be it Cliff Richard or The Shadows or Marty Wilde or any of the big pop stars of the day.
I don't think music was exciting before Motown for me. I really didn't like Frank Ifield and Cliff Richard. Sorry.
Then the world is yours.
Drab. It really was drab.
So what happened was, originally the BBC had kind of ignored pop music, and along came offshore radio, and they were playing pop 24 hours a day, basically. Radio Luxembourg was a medium wave station broadcasting from Luxembourg, and so the reception was very, very patchy. And Radio Caroline was our pirate radio station, anchored off in the North Sea.
Somehow I was listening to the radio, and in amongst all this strange stuff, you heard Pride and Joy by Marvin Gaye, or Mickey's Monkey by The Miracles. And it was just fantastic.
Those days, nearly every artist had a fan club, but they'd be amateur fan clubs. It wouldn't be anything to do with the record label in particular.
Dave Gordy wrote to Barry Gordy and said, "Can I start a fan club?" Shock, surprise, letter came back, "Yes, you can." Wow. It became the Tamla Motown Appreciation Society.
Barry Gordy had a whole family of little soul labels. Tamla, Motown, Gordy, Soul, VIP. Dave was the first person to use that expression, Tamla Motown.
Everything was done in this 12 by 12 bedroom in a house in Bexley Heath.
Dave typed every single issue himself, did the layouts, the lettering was done with a product called Letraset.
Cut and paste, little diagrams here and there. The days where you had to cover your mistakes with a bit of Tipex.
It's the life of the artisan. You own the means of production, and Dave was hot for that.
See, I do actually see art as having a didactic purpose. I do feel that art, in a sense, should be a vehicle for conveying ideas.
And you look at these magazines now that he produced, they're iconic. He didn't get paid, he just did it for the love of it.
5 shillings, I think it was. So I sent off my postal order to Church Road, Bexley Heath, Kent. And a few days later got a little sort of handmade card. You got a badge which said Swinger and Friend with 2 printers' fists on it.
Little newsletter coming through the letterbox was your way to find out about this whole other world.
It was spreading the word, spreading the gospel about the music.
Yes, it was sort of quite obsessive.
Dave was fairly well single-handedly responsible for bringing Motown to the British public.
Little Stevie Wonder was the first Motown artist to appear in the UK. He performed on Ready, Steady, Go in December 1963.
Ready, Steady, Go was, the pop show. It was, the most important one. And we always used to watch it because, any pop fan would.
He was 13 years old, and Dusty Ringfield and myself had gone to the Olympia in Paris, basically to see the Shirelles. But we didn't know that the package included Dionne Warwick, who was absolutely fabulous, and little Stevie Wonder. And we went back afterwards and talked to Stevie's people and said, "What are you doing after the Olympia?" And they said, "Going home." And we said, no, you're coming to London first to be on Ready Steady. And they said yes. So that was the first Motown artist on Ready Steady Go. So much energy, so much presentation, included the audience. They loved him, and so did we. I mean, we're just going, oh my God, this is the future.
My pleasure to introduce three girls who made a tremendous impact in America and begin to show up in the charts here too. It's welcome to Martha and the Vandellas.
Ready, Steady, Go was absolutely essential. If you were in the pop music business in the early 1960s, you needed to be on that TV show in Britain. It was the Beatles did it, Stones did it, all of the big stars.
You say you had a record ready, but no name. This is an unusual
we were
step
fortunate to get it. Fortunate enough to get a recording before a record.
There was a sense of pride, if you like, because as a black person, there weren't many people of your kind of background and colour to even look at. You know, so when you saw people and they were really good, that was a real bonus.
So we sat down together, the three of us, including Barry Gordy, our boss, and we put little words together and made Vandellas.
Friday night ritual was watching Ready, Steady, Go. Not just because of the British artists that were on there, but of course of the American artists, because we got to see people that even in America didn't necessarily get to be on like a major Friday night TV show. It was amazing.
We would have meetings and we would listen to the records and people would say, I love that. Sometimes I'd have to argue and say, I'm going to book it whether you like it or not. But not very often. Usually everybody was, agreed on what we could and should do.
Motown really didn't mean anything in Britain until you could argue 1964. I mean, the first hit that Motown had in Britain was Mary Wells' My Guy. Top 5 in the British chart. And Motown was fortunate in following it up fairly swiftly after My Guy with the Supremes. When you have hits, people want to know more about you. And then, so what is Motown and who is Barry Gordy and where do they come from?
The Supremes definitely paved the way for every girl band that's ever existed ever since. You couldn't have had Destiny's Child if you never had the Supremes, right? Baby Love or, anything that the Supremes did, you just wanted to be them. They looked great.
I remember clearly seeing the Supremes on Top of the Pops. To see black people on the television doing their music and singing so beautiful songs and songs that reminisce with you as a black person. Oh God, yeah, it was amazing. You go to work in the morning and your shoulder will be high up, sort of a thing. Seeing those black folks.
bands of the 60s, there were so few black musicians. I remember Georgie Fame and the Blue Flames had a black percussion player. And that stood out to me. People used to say, is that your uncle? Because they didn't see any other black people either. You know, so that's how rare it was. The truth is that at that time, black people basically didn't count. I lived in a place called Whitehaven, very appropriately named, okay? And we were basically the only black family in the town. The minority was such a minority that it wasn't a consideration. We were invisible.
I think one of the things that was a theme and a strand that ran through Dave Gordy's life was being radical. He was obviously very aware of race as an issue.
Then he realized that he couldn't just champion black American music, he also had to fight racism along the line as well. They were hand in hand. We've got a big war on here, we've got to fight it both. We've got to champion the music and get rid of the racism that goes with it. And he would not stand for any racism whatsoever in his entire life.
What I loved about black American music was, I mean, politically I'd been aware of the struggle of black American people, the injustice that black American people had suffered.
You know, Dave Godin felt a sense of a need for black music to get that recognition. That was part of what drove him.
Barry Gordy was very clear that when the Supremes had their first hits in Britain, his whole attitude completely changed. So it just changed his whole perception of what could be possible. And I think that that's really was the catalyst, in a sense, for him wanting to bring Dave over to America.
I think Barry Gordy was impressed by the way Dave handled himself in Britain, the way it published a magazine.
They were intrigued by this fact that there was this guy on the other side of the Atlantic who seemed to know quite a lot about the music and who they were. They sent him a telegram inviting him to visit the US. I mean, can you imagine what he must have felt like?
And he showed him all around the buildings, then Marvin Gaye turned up, and he sat talking to Marvin Gaye, and he's meeting everybody in there. Martha Reeves, all this sort of stuff. And he became massive friends with them all.
Dave was probably the greatest example of love and pushing forth our career, for sure, because he took such an interest in who we were and what we were doing. We corresponded often. We had a very close relationship where I felt like I could share, you know, intimate details that you wouldn't do with just anybody.
I think Barry Gordy brought him over because Barry Gordy was a smart businessman, and he saw an amazing opportunity for this whole stable of artists that he was building. And the idea of having someone in Britain who would be an advocate for that obviously appealed to him.
Barry Gordy came to rely on him, came to trust his opinions. He had Barry Gordy's ear.
The fact is, they put Dave on the payroll, and he got paid to do the Tamla Motown Appreciation Society, and he got paid to do the magazine Hitsville USA. So that was obviously a business move.
Dave actually said, you've got too many labels. You need an identity for what you're selling in Britain. And he literally wrote all Barry Gordy's label names down on slips of paper, chopped them up, moved them around on a table until two words came together that said Tamla Motown. And Gordy loved it. He says, yeah, that's great.
And a lot of people don't realise that actually that was a British thing. There is no Tamla Motown in America.
So it is quite safe to say that if Dave Godin had never existed, we would not have the label Tamla Motown.
This came in an envelope one morning, and I thought, what's this? Why am I getting a record? It was a treasure to behold. Oh, this is the Hitsville, USA, the Greetings to Tamla Motown Appreciation Society members, the record that was sent to TMAS members by Dave Godin on behalf of the Motown Recording Corporation.
Greetings to all of you swingers and friends. This is Barry Gordy Jr. It was a real pleasure meeting Dave and getting first-hand information about the music scene over there.
A cherished memory. It was like hearing from old friends that they'd taken the time and the trouble to go into the studio and record the dedication to us. And yeah, I was there. I'm pleased to say I was there.
Hi there, swingers and friends. This is Bill Smokey Robinson of the Miracles, extending our greetings to all the Tamla Motown fans in England. We're looking forward to coming over and seeing you very soon.
Nowhere to run to, baby. Nowhere to hide.
There was a big to-do, you could say, about the fact that there was going to be this review coming to Britain with all these artists from Detroit.
It was in the NME. When I saw it advertised, I was on the bus downtown to get my tickets. I could never have imagined seeing them in real life.
For me as a fan, learning that those artists were coming to the UK, I was going to be able to see them in concert. You know, it was bringing heaven to your hometown. It was extraordinary. The artists in the second week of March began to fly into London. Martha and the Vandellas and Stevie and the Miracles and the Supremes, Earl Van Dyke and the band, and the Temptations, who came in only for promotion. They didn't join the tour.
We were in awe, a state of awe, because it was a shock to us to see that we were being received so wonderfully well by the English people. That was the power of Motown. That was the power of the music that was coming from Motown.
I was a newspaper man at the Detroit Free Press, and one day one of the Motown guys said, "Hey, we're all going to London. Why don't you come along and write stories about it?" I thought this was really exciting, and so I ended up going with them. Even as a 30-year-old journalist, I'd spent time with consequential people. What made this group so unique was its accessibility. You could sit and have a conversation with anybody, and they were young and open and in so many ways innocent, and would answer almost any question you'd ask.
We were beyond excitement because, you know, you're talking about actually another world, something outside of the United States, you know, another country.
They'd come off that plane, and all of a sudden there was all these kids with these little bunches of flowers and chocolates and banners saying, "We welcome you." You wouldn't get that these days, would you? Nobody would do that. It must have been a very magical moment for Dave Godin.
Introduced by Dusty Springfield.
The Ready, Steady, Go special was done basically by Dusty Springfield. She loved the music.
Elkin Allen was my boss, and I sat down and said, "You won't believe this, but they're absolutely great. The music is incredible." And he said, "Let me stop you. Will Dusty present it?" I said, "Oh, yes." I thought, she better, because we haven't even discussed it. So I said, "Yes, she will." So he said, "Okay, let's do it." And so we did the first Motown special.
Well, this next artist, he really lives up to his name. He was born blind, but he has a fantastic musical talent. He plays organ and piano and harmonica and drums, you name it, and he plays it. And he's still only 15. Here with his great new record, "Kiss Me Baby," it's Stevie Wonder!
everybody was having a good time.
Dusty was a wonderful spirit, you know. She was a great door opener for Motown, for Motown's acts, for Motown's music, the acceptance of Motown. So she was that kind of a power hitter and power player that she really showed and appreciated the love of Motown. And with her being who she was, people would listen.
She was in her element. It also was lovely because back then, Dusty was very new to everything, and she really enjoyed things. Like just having fun. And you can hear when she sings the duet with Martha on Wishing and Hoping, you could actually hear Dusty laugh in the middle. I mean, what a joy to hear that. Because Dusty and Martha were friends, I think they just arranged it themselves, and nobody else got a look in. Just everybody was excited. We knew that we were doing something that was it was kind of a miracle, because who on earth would let us have this many American black artists on one show? We invited the Motown Appreciation. Dave Godin was so important and so much part of the birth of Motown. And little David Nathan, who was probably 15 or 16 at that stage.
It's true to say that I had never seen that many black American artists all on one show. I mean, I don't think anyone had at that point, unless you went to America. So it was an exciting experience. What is it about Motown? What is it about soul music? It's the pain and the pleasure. It's what's in there. It's the pleasure and the pain. I've been openly gay since 1967. So the struggles, the challenges of being gay in the 60s. I do sometimes think that if I hadn't found this music, hadn't found me, or I hadn't found it, I don't know how easy it would have been for me to make it through life. Honestly, I really mean that.
And then she said, just because you become a young man now, there's still some things that you don't understand now. Before you ask some girl for a hand now.
Tour opened in 2 shows in London, Finsbury Park Astoria and the Hammersmith Odeon. And then they went out pretty much every night for the next 3 weeks. They did 20 cities and towns across England, Scotland and Wales. Went to Bournemouth, Wigan, Cardiff, Manchester, Leicester. Every major music city got to see the Motown show that year. Seeing it in my hometown in Bristol. I'd be surprised if there were 50 people in the audience.
It would have been better to have more people there, but however, people can only go if they know you're going to be there. And getting the word out was not the easiest always. You know, you can't always expect something to happen that if you don't know about it, how can you show up?
So what happened was, on British radio and television, there were hardly any black people at all. You know, so you can understand that when you had these records coming in by ostensibly a black music record label, people didn't really know what to think. Were they going to give this the same treatment as they were giving the normal pop stuff? Or were they going to think, well, not too sure about this, it's going to have to prove itself? And I think that they took the latter, which is, it's going to have to prove itself. Motown fans were in a real minority, and they saw the world slightly differently. You know, they just thought, oh, this is great music.
There's still some things that you don't
I was a couple of rows from the front, and I looked back, and if I saw 50 people, so what? All I cared about was who was on stage in front, singing that music that meant so much to me. I mean, it was like that moment I could have died and gone to heaven.
The price of the tickets on the Motown Revue live performances were like a couple of bob more than the Stones were charging. And I don't know who thought that that was a good idea. Because the sales were really not good, they added Georgie Fame to shows out of town. So Georgie was, helped sell some tickets.
Every evening, when all my days work a suit, I call my baby and let's go watch her with you. I met some movies, but she don't seem to dig that, and then she asked me, why don't I come to
Early 65, we just had our first #1 hit. So we were kind of flavour of the month at that particular time.
That's what I say, yeah.
We were tickled pink, I think is the phrase, just to think that we were of the same importance musically to be part of that tour.
She never misses, she gives it all that she's got, and when she asks
We were in two coaches, and the musicians were on one coach and the artists on another. Well, touring was awful because there were no motorways to start with, so you were travelling on country roads. Each theatre had a catchment area, which was 50 miles around it, so you couldn't do 2 consecutive dates within 50 miles of one another. So you had to go north, south, up, down, all over the place.
It was pretty much a really grueling tour. Some of the places were quite a distance, and having the schedule, you wanted to make sure that you did your very best, and not only just doing your best, but while you were there, so you present yourself well to your audience. You didn't want to appear like you were so tired until you could barely make it off the bus.
The tour bus was like a home, but everybody got along. Everybody knew that this was part of the job. Now, there were little spats and all those kind of things that happen in any household. But this was one of those households that would just gloss it over. Everybody would move on. It didn't happen.
There were games, there was singing, there was like a lot of joking, telling stories, all of the above that you could think of to keep you entertained, and not only just entertained, but probably many times awake.
Well, I took my camera everywhere. I was trying to film everything. It was a hobby. It was something else to do rather than music. Bolex H8, I think it was called.
pride and joy, and I just love you, little darling.
Pete Coe, the saxophone player, and myself both bought cameras around the same time. We were trying to make little documentaries and all sorts of things, but on that particular tour, it was just filming what was going on. There were card games going on, there were stories being told, and just general banter. It was great. It was there was really no difference between the American musicians and the UK musicians. We were all musicians, so we all had the same interests and the same long, boring coach journeys. I guess at the time you don't realise that you're shooting a piece of history.
It was a great time to be someone coming from the Caribbean. You come in to watch a black performance, and that was something that didn't happen regular. 1965, the year that the Motown was here. There was Stevie Wonder on the stage, and I jumped on stage. I was very young and agile at that time, But now times have changed and I can't jump as much as I would like to. And I got on stage and there was Stevie Wonder, they're waiting. And I thought, here's my opportunity to go and I shook his hand and went up. Hello, Stevie, can I have your autograph? And he had one of those things that blind people have, and he signed the autograph. You could tell from the performance that these guys are, you know, something mega is going to happen to all these singers. I'm a very lucky person to be born at that time. I got to be one of those lucky persons, and very fortunate as well to shook Stevie Wonder's hand, have his autograph signed.
Another thing that touched me about this group was little Stevie Wonder. I mean, he was really small. He was really little.
He was just such a ball of energy, such a dynamic performer. Quite extraordinary, quite an extraordinary talent.
The Motown Review, they're actually doing 2 shows a day. But one thing that Stevie remembers was that when they went to Glasgow, he actually lost the suit. Because after the first show, somebody came around and said, "Oh, suits for cleaning, suits for cleaning." And whoever was looking after Stevie at the time gave them Stevie's suit to get cleaned. And of course, it never came back. So there's somebody in Glasgow with a little Stevie Wonder suit. I hope they appreciate it.
The Beatles have a lot to do with Motown. And of course, we shouldn't forget that the Supremes did an album called A Bit of Liverpool. Through the Beatles that I became aware of American R&B and what later became soul music. And specifically because they used to do cover versions of Motown songs, Money, You Really Got a Hold on Me, and Please Mr. Postman. And what was great is they mentioned the names of the original groups on the sleeve notes at the back of the LP. So I was like, I wonder who these American groups are. I've never heard of them. The kind of funny names, the Miracles, the Marvelettes. I'm like, I got a little kind of intrigued, like, yeah, wow. Groups like the Beatles, they came from the same working class background that I did. I think it was like the struggle that people have for making it in life. And maybe one of the connecting tissues between Motown and the working class kids of Britain was the sense of struggle, because the odds were not in our favor.
Liverpool was really quite buzzing with all the music stuff that was going on. Groups were big then. It was the Mersey sound and everything going on.
Well, it was thriving, wasn't it, Frank?
Yeah.
It was on the map.
It's been a hard day's night.
A lot of my friends, they worked in Nems, a record store which is owned by Brian Epstein. Then they said, "Do you want to come to these parties in Upper Parliament Street?" Motown was like an underground force. It was the whole black community, really, They weren't allowed in the clubs in the city centre. The white clubs, in other words. And they started their own. I didn't feel like I was in Liverpool because it was all purely American music. And it was so different to where I lived, in a village on the Wirral. felt very proud of the fact we were onto something. Chance to meet like-minded people. Being a Motown fan helped establish the relationship with Frank. Frank Collins and Carol Carter, they say we're in a band called the Excels. It's a lifelong friendship through all of the Motown, I would say. I thought they were as good as any of the Motown acts. They were incredible, and they never ever sounded like a white group at all. You know, you could have just put them on Motown and nobody would have known the difference.
Through Motown and, you know, being huge fans and being so inspired by Motown, we did form the Excels. Everyone was following the Beatles sort of sound and whatever, Jerry and the Pacemakers and all that lot. But we were just big Motown fanatics. After you.
Frank, how are you?
55 years ago.
Yeah, where have you
How
been
did
all
you
my
have
life?
all
I was sitting at the back.
Yeah.
We
in the
sat
cheap
over
seats,
there.
and you were in the posh seats.
Yeah, I remember
And all this middle bit was totally empty.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
We were down there.
Well, they called it the Ghost Tour,
Yeah.
apparently. Just remember, we were so excited. It was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To see all those artists in one place.
show.
I think we'd all gone backstage, you know, trying to get autographs. But I think they'd already gone. Anyway, we decided to make our way home. We saw Stevie Wonder and his tutor and his musical director having dinner through the glass door. Anyway, we decided to burst out into song.
On the pavement
As you
outside.
do. We started singing this song called I Wonder, which was a Crystal song, but it had the name Wonder in, so
I
that's
love
why we
that,
chose it.
Yeah.
And Stevie Wonder comes out with his tutor saying, sign them up, sign them up. Anyway, from that, they invited us to the Chester show, and we ended up auditioning in Stevie Wonder's hotel room.
Yeah.
Oh, what a memory.
I know, it was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Isn't it great? We can still remember it though.
They were big moments, weren't they, in our lives, all
Yeah.
that, you know. So I'll never
Still
forget.
big moments.
Yeah, I'll just never forget those times. What was it? Mama? We've got to find the right key for her.
Somebody I
Could call my own. So when the stars are shining bright,
I'll dream about the boys gonna hold me tight.
and I wonder who he'll be. Wonder if he'll be good to me. Wonder, gosh, oh gee. Wonder if he'll love me forever. I wonder forever. Well done. Well remembered.
What?
This is my 1965 diary and the entry for Saturday the 3rd of April. Tamla Motown Review, City Hall, it says at the top. The Beatles were on Thank You Lucky Stars, but I missed that. Went to town with them around 11:30. Had dinner, that's lunch, in the pit, that's the Paletta. Then went to City Hall, saw all except Miracles and Stevie. After show, went backstage and met everybody. What a day. Absolutely. It was very exciting. I had heard a couple of the live albums they did of the Motown Review, and I'd read about it. And, you know, you talk about the Apollo Harlem and places like that. Newcastle City Hall didn't seem quite the same. It just seemed amazing to me that it wasn't completely full. I did go and buy Diana Ross some pantyhose. They were just getting their beautiful gowns and everything sorted out, and Diana Ross had got a snag in her pantyhose. She said, oh, I need some pantyhose. And I said, I know where I can get some, I know where I can get some. So I dashed out. Shops shut at 5:30 in those days, so you couldn't even rush out and buy anything. In the main street in Newcastle, in Northumberland Street, there was a machine that sold tights. And they only had one size and one colour, so I got this little box of pantyhose tights and rushed back and handed them over, and I believe she put them on. It was the days of tights in machines. If only they had them now. It was just extraordinary how personable they were and how these people who'd made these extraordinary records were so nice.
Barry would love to give gifts to some of his talent. At the end of the tour, he gave me a handful of money, and he said, I want you to take the girls, which means the Supremes, out and make them happy. Tell them how much I appreciated all that they've done. So I marshaled the three girls together, and I said, we can go to a great restaurant, we can go to the best museum, see the finest art in the history of mankind. What would you really like to do? And one of them said, buy shoes. And they all sort of jumped with joy. So we got in a cab, went to a shoe store, and they just bought and bought and bought. And it was one of the nicest events of my life. They were lovely young people, and they were just, a few years out of a housing project in Detroit. They didn't know a lot about the world, but they were already professionals. They knew that what they sang was important to a lot of people, and they wanted to do it right, and they were willing to do it every night, night after night.
Anytime you look at the history of Motown in Britain, you have to think about that 1965 tour in so many respects. Because it was a milestone, and it was a milestone partly because of failure, but partly because there's a fascinating story to it. And clearly, Dave Godin's enthusiasm for seeing those artists come to Britain was part of it. It was premature, because most ordinary music fans didn't really know what Motown was. In a sense, it was the right thing to do, it was just the wrong time. The Sound of Motown was recorded on March the 18th, and it went out on April 28th, 2 weeks after they'd left the country. So it was a tragedy that was the case. And part of it is that it wasn't necessarily considered particularly commercial by some of the regional franchise TV stations around the UK.
That whole show took your breath away. It really did. I mean, even now thinking about it, it's unbelievable that so much could be done in such a short space of TV time.
The sad thing was that it was after the live show. So we didn't help the sales of the live show, but we certainly helped the future sales of records and performances.
Who these artists have become, those Motown artists that Dave championed all those years ago, how many of them have gone on to become really living legends.
when you hit the stage and then you are accepted. That is the greatest feeling ever.
The 16-year-old me had no idea what Motown would become. It has become one of the cultural forces in music.
Even now, like little kids know Motown songs. They came out with this whole new music and this whole new style that appealed to every race. That was beautiful.
Very superstitious, writings on the wall. Very superstitious.
Motown changed my life because it gave me a drive, a desire to be part of the world that created something like Motown.
And every time I saw Stevie Wonder on television, I think, I know him. I met him, so I would think, yeah, great moment, great moment.
13-month-old baby,
Yeah, it was Motown that started, whetted our appetite for singing and doing music. Singing, just like with the artists in Detroit, was my meal ticket out of Kirby.
The fact that Barry Gordy was prepared to give little Stevie Wonder a chance, then had that knock-on effect for me. So it's definitely changed my life in that way.
My life has been about my dedication and passion for this music. I would say that music saved my life. It really did provide me with what I needed as a teenager.
He was, and I have to say is, forever and ever, an amazing, awesome gentleman who helped the careers of so many people.
It's one of America's greatest cultural gifts that's enriched the life of Britain.
to shine.